Hi, today we're going to talk a little bit about our LFR 1100 omnidirectional loudspeaker, and we're going to talk a little bit about placement and actually how to wire it up and some of the settings that are available on the DSP unit. As many of you know, the LFR 1100 is omnidirectional, and that just means that it radiates sound in 360 degrees in all directions. And to achieve that, there are drive units. There's a complement of 2 mid-ranges and 2 tweeters, like on the front of the speaker, on the back. Because of that, the relative placement of the LFR 1100 to the back wall and the angle at which you've got it to the back wall influences the soundstage and the way that the sound is going to blend at the listening position. So one of the things that we recommend, if at all possible, is to allow a couple of feet from the rear of the speaker to the back wall. And in this setup here, it's about 2 feet. If, however, you need to get the speaker closer than that, there is what we call a boundary compensation switch on the back of the unit. Now, there's no hard and fast rule of exactly when that switch needs to be used. You just have to experiment with it and listen really to if the soundstage is big and full, or whether when you move the speakers back into position the soundstage collapses and it sounds more like a conventional loudspeaker. You want it to sound big and open and spacious. Another thing to note is that even though the back of the speaker is slightly angled, so that you don't have to angle the speaker towards the listening position much, I find that in most situations actually towing the speaker in, aiming it towards the listening position a little bit, helps to get that reflected information out from behind the speaker to give you that enveloping soundstage. If you have one of the latest LFR models, the 880 or the even smaller 660, neither of those models has the angled back, in which case towing is extremely important, because if the speakers are just pointing straight, of course that reflection from the back of the speaker won't escape and will just bounce around behind it. So make sure that you tow those speakers in towards the listening position to get a nice seamless soundstage.
So in follow-up to Andrew's discussion of the placement of the loudspeaker in the room for an LFR 1100 or 660 or 880, I thought I'd just get into a bit about how the electronics works, because for these 3 models, for the LFR series, the rear channel is separated from the front channel by this digital signal processor. So it requires 4 channels of amplification to drive 1 pair of loudspeakers. And what I've got here is I have the DSP box sitting on top of an ADA 1500 amplifier. And this particular DSP is sort of the top of the line preamp model of DSP. There's now going to be 4 models. But here you have either XLR or RCA inputs, and then a set of left channel front and rear output, either XLR or RCA, and the right side over here, into the 4-channel ADA 1500 amplifier, and then there's a set of speaker wires, or 2 sets of speaker wires going to each speaker, one for the front and one for the rear. Here would be your input from your preamplifier. In the other models of this digital signal processor, there are no XLR connectors, but we now have a choice between either an RCA input or a high-level input. So if you're using a processor that does not have preamplifier outputs, you're still able to run any of the speakers in the LFR series. Then you would simply take the speaker wires from the receiver for the front, right, and left, go into the high level, or if you do have pre-out, go into the RCA, and then out of the RCAs into the amplifier, an ADA 1250 or 1500, and then the 4 channels out to the 2 speakers. Then there's another model which combines our ADA 1000 amplifier with the DSP. So in that particular case, all you would do is coming from your receiver, either using line level pre-outs or the speaker outputs for right and left channel, you would go directly into the one unit. And it has the amplifier in it, and it has 4 channels amplification coming out. So it's an all-in-one unit, a lot of convenience there. And then there's, in the 4th model, it works similarly, except that it also contains a preamp. So what you're able to do, there are now 3 selectable input sources and 4 channels of amplification out. So now, and there's a volume of course, and balance control and input selector on the front. So now all you need to do is hook any source to the DSP amp combination, go right to the speakers, and you're done. So that, I hope that helps explain how this works. It seems a little bit complicated at first, but it's really quite straightforward. It's just simply taking 2 channels in, separating it into 4 channels so that we have a front rear for each speaker. And lastly, I think I should just mention the boundary switch. Andrew mentioned it in his discussion about the placement of the loudspeaker. It's located here. It is on all 4 of the models, and it's boundary compensation on and off. So normally what you would do is leave it in the off position, and if you're getting close to the wall, then you would turn this boundary compensation on. But certainly there's nothing wrong with experimenting it, no matter where your speakers are actually located. There's nothing wrong with experimenting between the switch on and the switch off, just to see what works best in your room. Well, thanks very much for watching our video on the LFR series of loudspeakers.